All right, I'll get this running. Welcome to our virtual presentation of some current research that we are working on um, regarding the use of blockchain technology as a platform for secondary trading of private equity. I am Ruth Hughes, Associate Professor of Business Law, and am joined in this project by Ken Wong, Associate Professor of Finance, and Tony Bowie, Assistant Professor of Accounting. All of us share an interest in the effect of blockchain technology on our various areas of study. So as we talk about this research, it has evolved over time, and I'll talk about a little bit about the history of how we got into it, as well as our next steps. So I want to begin by giving everyone an overview of private offerings, private equity offerings under the Securities Act of 1933, because that's what we're really focusing on in this research. The Securities Act of 1933 has this global requirement that any offering of securities be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And registration of securities would be a public offering and obviously is very expensive and very complicated. So the way that the act is structured is to provide a series of exemptions. And this is a case where exemptions are usually larger than the actual rule. So the most common exemption categories, there's Regulation D, private or small offerings, Regulation A, mini registrations, and then the new kid on the block, Regulation C, equity crowdfunding. And with equity crowdfunding, that is a method where an issuer can sell securities over the internet to an unlimited number of people. And so it differs from Regulation D, which limits the number of offerees and limits the type of offerees. Regulation A has this sort of mini registration requirement. Regulation C is designed to be kind of the best of both worlds, if you will, using the internet. You can sell to as many people as you want. You have to use a registered website. They're known as intermediaries that are registered broker dealers to sell your securities. And you do have similar disclosures to a Regulation D offering. So you've got these different kinds of exemptions that do not have to be registered, but which all do require some level of disclosure to the investors. So one of the interesting things, the Securities Act of 1933 does not restrict or mandate specific types of securities that can be offered. Their only requirement is that you disclose the terms accurately and completely of whatever you're offering. So traditionally, common stock, preferred stock, promissory notes, similar things to that have been offered under the Regulation D and Regulation A offerings. And that's what people expected. Well, with crowdfunding, things became more innovative. And I think they became more innovative for a couple of reasons. First of all, there was this need to avoid a lot of shareholders per se at once coming into these very small companies. There were, and there may have been some other reasons, but the simple agreement for future equity, subject of some of my past research, the SAFE, is one example of an innovative security that's really come into its own with crowdfunding. More recently, securitized tokens. Now everybody's hearing about these non-fungible tokens, these assets that are digital. And securitized tokens are interesting because they are designed to be digital securities. They have a token offering that's tied to some sort of future performance of the company. Sometimes they are tied to a future share in the company, but they're designed to be completely digital, and they're designed to use blockchain verification and trading. So I'm going to talk more about that later, but basically it's all programmable code. So this is all done digitally, it's all done in code. And right now the securitized tokens have been mainly in equity crowdfunding. I will mention that these, for us, we just sort of discovered these, and I use that in quotes, when a student who was doing undergraduate research with us was gathering data on equity crowdfunding, he noticed one intermediary doing a lot of these securitized tokens offerings. And so we looked into it a little bit more, and it appeared that this intermediary was basically setting itself up to try and do secondary trading using these issuers that had securitized tokens that could be traded on a blockchain platform, which was a really interesting topic and sort of where this whole research idea started. And so the intermediary at the center of all this was indeed Start Engine. And Start Engine is a well-known intermediary website. They have indeed been selling most of the securitized token offerings among all of the other intermediaries. They're not the only one, they're just the most active one. Start Engine does both crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, and Regulation A offerings. So they have also facilitated, as a broker-dealer, those Regulation A mini offerings as well. Now, the secondary trading, as we talk about it, needs a little bit of background information. When you have a private offering, you are not guaranteed as an investor a secondary market. In fact, there really probably won't be a secondary market for your purchase. So this is in great contrast to public trading. If you buy stock in a public offering, you can, it's by its nature going to be traded on one of the public exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or one of the others. And so with a private offering and this lack of secondary trading, it's been problematic. One of the things with technology is that we've seen a rise of things known as alternative trading systems. And they are regulated now by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Initially, they were started by broker-dealers, and they were called dark web trading systems. That sounds very negative. But the SEC felt rightfully that they needed to get involved here. And so they developed a regulation to say you can have this trading platform for whatever securities you want, whether they be public or private, but you have to meet certain capitalization requirements. You have to meet certain requirements, and we have to vet you. But Regulation ATS has been, of late, in the last few years, a pretty active regulation that's been used. Now, normally with private offerings and secondary trading, it's really private transactions. So the only way that you would be able, if you bought common stock in a private equity transaction, you would have to find basically another buyer if you wanted to sell it and enter into an individual contract with them. And as a realistic matter, this required networking. So for secondary markets, you either were going to end up waiting for a public offering to get bought out, or some sort of other exit strategy that involved maybe a large buyout. It was rather cumbersome, and it limited the value and limited the liquidity greatly for these private equity offerings. So it may or may not be a coincidence that the rise of alternative trading systems has also been based to some degree on the recognition that blockchain technology might be used as a trading platform. This is also known as distributed ledger technology, and I want to talk a minute about how this works. Blockchain technology, particularly when it comes to like transactions, is all based on programmable code. And one of the things that everyone needs to understand is that humans don't get involved. In addition, you can't really see it. And as a result, I have students all the time that ask, well, what does it look like? So I've developed visuals. I didn't develop the visuals, I found visuals. And they show how blockchain works. And basically, everything is coded. A transaction is coded. That coded transactions enters into a peer-to-peer network. And that network is decentralized, and there are multiple different peers that will validate all the aspects of that transactions. Once it is validated, a block is created, and the block basically tells the technology, tells the platform to implement the transaction. So when you're talking about trading securities, this actually does work pretty well, because it would just put in the amount that you want to sell, the amount that you would, how much you think it's worth. Somebody else would do it would be a matching system, if you will. Human intervention, though, at any point in this is not possible. And so it is automatically implemented, and there really is no, it's self-enforcing. There's no opportunity to stop the transaction once it starts. So this was an early example, relatively early, I think it's like 2 or 3 years old, Open Finance Network, that was approved as an alternative trading system. And you can see that they talk about assets and token-based securities. This is not as much for private equity as it is for coin and tokens that are investments in and of themselves, as well as some public securities. But they do have on Open Finance a very nice graphic of how their system works. And you can sort of talk about how it all goes into, and they use coins to show that, but it shows this ledger system. Templum Markets is another one. Now, I had mentioned Start Engine alternative, that Start Engine as an intermediary was seeking approval of an alternative trading system. They recognized early on that securitized tokens would be a way to facilitate an eventual platform that they could use really for value added. So if you're an issuer in crowdfunding and you want to sign up to have your securities sold, that it would be more attractive if you could also, as an intermediary, promise that you would also allow secondary trading on those securities. And that's really where they're going with this. So when we first started this research, they were just in the proposal stage. They were seeking capital. They were talking actually at this conference about the difficulty in starting an alternative trading system, but they got it. And they are now up and running on their Start Engine site, buying and selling shares in startups, as you can see. And if you scroll down, this is a screenshot, you will see that they right now only will buy and sell shares in one stock, their own, the Start Engine company. I guess it's almost like a beta test for their system, but it is up and running. They are a registered alternative trading system. They are using blockchain technology, and they're eventually moving towards buying and selling shares both in their own crowdfunding issuers and their Reg A issuers. Now, one thing to note right now, Start Engine is talking about only having the platform for their own issuers. It's unclear as to whether or not they're going to seek to expand that for maybe an issuer that didn't use their website. So there's still a lot of research to be done, and we're working on it now, and we're hoping to finish up to have an article ready for publication by the end of the summer. The liquidity logistics was a big question, and another presentation in the Sidhu Symposium is by Taylor Balmarito, and Taylor is going to go through and talk about how you address the liquidity. Remember, you can't use any intervention. So a bank or government currency won't really work on a blockchain system. So you have to use some sort of currency or coin that will be coded and will interact, be digital with the blockchain platform. So Taylor will talk about that in some detail, and we look forward to including his important research in our global research. We will be talking more about secondary trading and maybe some other platforms that are available or become available for private equity offerings, and then look into maybe some thoughts about the future regulation of blockchain and distributed ledger technology. This has been an area of a great deal of thought and talk because it has developed so quickly and has become so literally global in nature. So I look forward to hearing questions, hearing from you. I know this is recorded. And so if we don't have a chance to ask questions at the symposium, ruth.hughes@wilkes.edu, you can reach me. I will forward your questions to my colleagues, Ken Wan and Tony Bowie, and thank you for your attention to this presentation.